Ladies on the Phone, Part 1. 11 years after learning about Henrietta in Deffler's classroom, on my 27th birthday, I stumbled on a collection of scientific papers from something called the Gila Cancer Control Symposium at Morehouse School of Medicine, Atlanta, one of the oldest historically black colleges in the country. The symposium had been organized in Henrietta's honor by Roland Patillo, a professor of gynecology at Morehouse who'd been one of George Guy's only African American students. When I called Roland Patillo to see what he knew about Henrietta, I told him I was writing a book about her. "Oh, you are?" he said, laughing a slow, rumbling laugh that said, "Oh, child, you have no idea what you're getting into. Henrietta's family won't talk to you. They've had a terrible time with the HeLa cells." "You know her family?" I said. "Can you put me in touch with them?" "I do have the ability to put you in touch with them, but you need to answer a few questions starting with, why should I?" For the next hour, Patillo grilled me about my intentions. As I told him about the history of my HeLa obsession, he grumbled and sighed, letting out occasional and wells. Eventually he said, "Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are white." "Is it that obvious?" "Yes," he said. "What do you know about African Americans in science?" I told him about the Tuskegee syphilis study, like I was giving an oral report in history class. It started in the 30s when U.S. Department of Health researchers at the Tuskegee Institute decided to study how syphilis killed from infection to death. They recruited hundreds of African American men with syphilis, then watched them die slow, painful, and preventable deaths, even after they realized penicillin could cure them. The research subjects didn't ask questions. They were poor and uneducated, and the researchers offered incentives, free physical exams, hot meals, and rides into town on clinic days, plus $50 burial stipends for their families when the men died. The researchers chose black subjects because they, like many whites at the time, believed blacks were a notoriously syphilis-soaked race. The public didn't learn about the Tuskegee study until the 70s, after hundreds of men enrolled in it had already died. The news spread like pox through black communities. Doctors were doing research on black people, lying to them, and watching them die. Rumors started circulating that the doctors had actually injected the men with syphilis in order to study them. "What else?" Patillo grumbled. I told him I'd heard about the so-called Mississippi appendectomies, unnecessary hysterectomies performed on poor black women to stop them from reproducing and to give young doctors a chance to practice the procedure. I'd also read about the lack of funding for research into sickle cell anemia, a disease that affected blacks almost exclusively. "It's interesting that you called when you did," he said. "I'm organizing the next HeLa conference." And when the phone rang, I just sat down at my desk and typed the words Henrietta Lacks on my screen. And we both laughed. "It must be a sign," we said. "Perhaps Henrietta wanted us to talk." "Deborah is Henrietta's baby girl," he said, very matter of fact. "The family calls her Dale. She's almost 50 now, still living in Baltimore with grandchildren of her own. Henrietta's husband is still alive. He's around 84, still goes to the clinics at Johns Hopkins." He dropped this like a tease. "Did you know Henrietta had an epileptic daughter?" Patillo asked. "No. She died at 15, soon after Henrietta's death. Deborah is the only daughter left," he said. "She came near a stroke recently because of the agony she's gone through regarding inquiries into her mother's death and those cells. I won't be a part of anyone doing that to her again." I started to speak, but he interrupted me. "I need to go see patients now," he said abruptly. "I'm not ready to put you in touch with the family yet, but I think you're honest about your intentions. We will talk again after I think. Call back tomorrow." After three straight days of grilling, Patillo finally decided to give me Deborah's phone number. But first, he said there were a few things I needed to know. He lowered his voice and rattled off a list of do's and don'ts for dealing with Deborah Lacks. Don't be aggressive. Do be honest. Don't be clinical. Don't try to force her into anything. Don't talk down to her. She hates that. Do be compassionate. Don't forget that she's been through a lot with these cells. Do have patience. You'll need that more than anything," he told me.